Peer review is an absolutely essential component of the modern scientific writing process, communication process. But like a lot of things in science, people really don't understand how it works a lot of the time. So I wanted to create a little video that provided as an introduction to this for people who aren't familiar with the subject. Hi, I'm Jesse. I help scientists and aspiring scientists to communicate their research more effectively through lessons in science writing and science marketing. This particular video is going to be for anybody who's interested in what the peer review process is, how it works. So this is going to be particularly useful for people who don't have really hardcore science experience. Before I get into that though, I should do a quick explanation of the difference between science writing and scientific writing. Science writing is any writing that is on a science-related topic and is generally understood that it could be both for specialized audiences and for the general public. Scientific writing is a subset within science writing where it's directed only for specialists within a scientific discipline. So it's scientists writing for other scientists. I'm going to be putting another video out soon that describes a little bit more about the scientific writing process. If you're interested, keep your eyes open for that. But this is important because when we're talking about the scientific writing, is specifically for sharing knowledge between people within these expert disciplines. So if it seems like a very high standard for random blog posts or maybe an article in a newspaper, yes, it is, but that's because it has this particular standard in academic science writing. And if you want to learn more about science writing, I have videos on that as well, and you can find those in the description. Something that's really important though about the academic scientific writing process is that there's really no formal oversight, in the sense that there's nobody watching you over your shoulder to make sure that you're actually doing the experiments that you say that you're doing, or that your results match with what you say that they are. And with that, you need to have some check or balance in place in order to protect the scientific community from people just publishing crap, essentially, because bad research will make it more difficult for other people to make sense of what's going on in the science. So that's where peer review fits in. Academics will write up their articles and then they'll send it into a journal. First, what happens is that it's going to be reviewed by an editor, essentially, who is going to be making sure that the research at least passes a first glance sort of test, in the sense that it makes sense to fit in with the type of journal that it is, or for instance that it's on topic, or that the quality is at least somewhat in the ballpark that's worthy of consideration. And that's going to be the first test that it's going to go through. Now this editor is going to be knowledgeable in the field that they're covering, but won't be a dedicated subject matter expert at the top tier level in the discipline of whatever is being covered here. And you're going to need to get that level of review of this paper to make sure that it really passes that test of being the highest quality possible. So what happens next is that the editor will send out the paper to review to a handful of reviewers who are usually professors, but essentially people who are subject matter experts, true dedicated specialists in this area of whatever is being discussed in the paper. So how exactly are these reviewers even selected? It's actually usually the authors that will suggest people from it, because they're the ones who are writing this paper and will talk about particular authors of their work that they're building off of, and those are often where they start in terms of finding people to act as reviewers. Though the author doesn't actually know who will be their reviewers, so the editor will take those suggestions, will reach out to those people, in most cases assuming that they're appropriate. If those folks aren't appropriate, or if they say no, the editor will then find new folks. They'll do more research, you look through the references list, find some people that say yes, until you get those 3 reviewers. Usually it's 3 reviewers for the paper, or however many that you need. Once that is all done, the reviewers will then review the paper, which is essentially an editing type process, but it is not just proofreading, looking for grammatical mistakes, although they might point those out if they catch them. The main thing that they're doing is focusing on the science and making sure that the science makes sense. Now remember, these are people who are subject matter experts in this field, which means that they are probably passionate and care a lot about what is happening in this field, and they want this field to advance, which means that they want good science happening within this field. So their job essentially is to stop bad science and trying to find problems or trying to find explanations that are unclear, or maybe processing of data that's problematic and that will lead the field astray in some capacity. So as a result, the reviewers try their hardest to poke holes or add criticism, or find ways to point out issues that need to be addressed within this paper. The reviewers send all of their comments back to the editor compiles them and sends them back to the authors, who are then responsible to respond to them. These comments could of course range between everything of like, oh, there's a minor errors here, maybe this could be polished up in these respects, to like, this is wrong, this is really needs to be fixed in some capacity, and the authors are then on the hook to be able to fix the paper or address the comments in some other way. That could involve doing new experiments, reprocessing data, changing the text in some other ways, though they could also just provide an explanation of saying like, okay, that was a nice point, but you're not wrong for these reasons. That's usually very nice and political, of course, but they will try to explain and strengthen their paper against the criticisms that have been offered by the reviewers. Once all of that's done, a new version of the paper will be sent back to the reviewers with commentary that's associated with it to explain any changes that have been made, and or explanations as to why changes weren't made. At this point, there might be another round of review. So the reviewers, if they are unhappy with what's going on here, they will take a look at it, add some more comments, send it back for maybe some further changes. Usually that isn't really what happens very often. At this point, if the reviewers are still very unhappy, they will suggest that the paper not be accepted to the paper, or the reviewers will say like, okay, these comments and concerns have been addressed and the paper will be accepted. So that'll obviously depend a lot on the particulars of the journal that's taking this on versus who it is that's reviewing, things of this nature. But in most cases, I think at this point, it's usually either accepted or rejected. If it's accepted at this point, it's going to go through a little bit more of a publishing process to make sure that it fits into a nice, beautiful PDF to be able to share with the world. If it is rejected, it can be submitted to other papers. You might be able to resubmit it to that same journal in a few months with some more results or something like this. That's a part of it. There are a lot of different possibilities there, but essentially it's done at this point, and you can go further down the line later. But that's the academic publishing process, the review process in a nutshell. If it sounds like a bit of a pain in the ass and that it could be very slow, yeah, it is. Professors are busy people. This could take months between the rounds of revisions, and if you look online, there are a lot of papers that it will tell you that it's been over a year between the time that it was initially submitted to the journal versus when it's actually put online. There are other issues with it too, though. There are people concerned about things like bias, like for instance, the reviewers might think that the professor isn't great for whatever reason. They might not like them for whatever reason, because remember, they are part of the same academic focus, and they might be competitors with one another, hypothetically. Alternatively, you could see professors who don't like a particular university or research institution and are, as a result, more critical of the results that are there. The editor plays an important role in mediating that and deciding how valid various critiques are of a given article. But this is all kind of a very touchy-feely, like we don't get to see really what's happening behind the scenes very often. And that's one of the criticisms that you see of the peer review process, that there's a whole lot that's happening behind the scenes that we don't get to see, and could be prejudicial and excluding certain people from the scientific writing process. One last thing I quickly want to mention to differentiate before we close out here is the difference between a review article and a peer-reviewed article. A review article is a type of article that summarizes the accomplishments, the trajectory, critiques a given field. Like it is designed to bring together as a synopsis the progress of a given area, as opposed to the peer review process that we just talked about. Now, these review articles are usually peer-reviewed. I don't know why they chose this very similar names for these two things. I really am not happy about that fact, but I don't get to say in these things, unfortunately. Anyway, that'll wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like to learn about scientific writing process, science writing, science marketing, anything like that, be sure to subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Take care, folks.